The infinite, unforgiving theater of space cradled the Stardust Drifter, its scarred hull a testament to too many runs through contested territory, too many near misses with Imperial patrols, too many jumps on dwindling fuel reserves. Adam stared into the void, the familiar panorama of distant, indifferent stars offering no comfort, only reflecting the weary solitude that had become his constant companion since Alara, since the Meridian Colony disaster. Flying these supply lines for the fragmented resistance wasn't just a job, it was a penance, a way to feel marginally less helpless against the crushing weight of the Empire, the entity that had swallowed worlds and snuffed out futures, including his own. This run to Cygnus X-12 felt heavier than most. Supplies were critically low at the outpost. Whispers spoke of Imperial fleets massing nearby, and his fuel cells. The gauges glowed with numbers that screamed inadequacy. Enough to get there, perhaps. Enough to get back. That depended on prayer, luck, and silent running. Every flicker on the sensor board, every unusual energy reading, tightened the knot of anxiety in his stomach. A burst of raw static, like tearing metal, ripped through the cockpit's quiet hum, followed by a sound that wasn't quite language, wasn't quite machine noise. It was a broken cry, looped and decaying, embedded within a carrier wave using protocols he didn't recognize, not standard resistance encryption, nor the rigid, hierarchical signals of the Imperial fleet. A ghost signal, faint and desperate, painting coordinates on his navigation display. Coordinates that led away from Cygnus, away from the relative safety of his planned route, plunging deeper into a sector known for sudden, brutal Imperial sweeps, a place sane pilots avoided. Ignore it. The thought was immediate, cold, logical. The resistance on Cygnus depended on these supplies. His fuel was already past the margin of safety. His ship, the Drifter, was old, reliable but weary. No match for a modern Imperial warship. He remembered Alara's face. The last time he saw her on Meridian, before the orbital bombardment turned the colony into glass and ash. The Empire showed no mercy. Why should he risk everything for an unknown signal, likely bait for a trap? Yet, the signal pulsed again, weaker this time, freighted with an unmistakable sense of finality. Someone, something, was dying out there in the cold dark. His hand, calloused from years gripping the flight controls, hovered over the console, ready to delete the coordinates, to stick to the mission, to the bitter pragmatism that kept men like him alive in this war. But the ghost of Alara's belief in something better, something beyond mere survival, stayed his hand. He couldn't shake the image of a ship bleeding out, alone. He cursed, the sound harsh in the confined space. Damn it all. With grim resolve, he altered the freighter's course, the aged engines groaning a low protest. The fuel numbers seemed to plummet precipitously on the display. Quick detour. He lied to the empty co-pilot seat, the silence judging him. Just a look. The coordinates resolved into a treacherous asteroid field, a chaotic dance of rock and ice shards notorious as the Serpent's Teeth Nebula, a place where signals died and ships vanished. It was the perfect hunting ground. He cut the main drive, relying on microthruster bursts to navigate the silent labyrinth, the Drifter becoming just another shadow among shadows. His sensors, temperamental on a good day, struggled against the metallic interference and gravitational distortions. Then a flicker, a faint, intermittent energy signature, almost completely masked. He eased the freighter around a colossal, slowly tumbling shard of iron-rich rock and saw it. Not resistance, not pirate, Imperial, an Inquisitor-class interceptor. A blade of black metal designed for speed and lethality, now mortally wounded. One wing was mangled, sheared clean through, the other bent impossibly. The fuselage was punctured, scarred by energy weapon fire, venting residual atmosphere in ghostly plumes. It was wedged violently between two lesser asteroids, a hawk impaled on stone thorns. His own sensors hadn't picked up its initial distress call, only the weaker, non-standard echo. Why? Unless the primary beacon was offline, or deliberately disabled, or unless this secondary signal wasn't meant for Imperial ears at all. No life signs registered on the primary scan. Still, the phantom signal pulsed from within the wreck, automated, or a life form too weak, too alien, for his standard sensors to classify. Caution warred with the instinct that had brought him here. He maneuvered the drifter alongside the wreck, the magnetic grapples locking onto the interceptor's hull with a low, resonant thud that seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. The cockpit canopy, armored transparee steel, was a web of fractures, starred and buckled. He suited up, the familiar clicks and hisses of the environment suit a small ritual against the unknown. Oxygen pressure .green. Seals tight. Pulse pistol charged and holstered. Medkit secured to his thigh. He cycled through the drifter's airlock, the outer door whispering open onto the void. Magnetic boots clamped onto the interceptor's hull, the surface cold and dead beneath his feet. He moved towards the cockpit, peering through the least damaged section of the canopy. Inside, bathed in the faint, erratic glow of dying emergency lights, a figure slumped in the pilot's throne. The uniform was unmistakable. The dark, severe lines of an Imperial pilot, helmet obscuring the face. But Adam's breath caught. From the figure's back, emerging through tailored slits in the flight suit, were wings. Not metallic constructs, but organic. Large, dot-feathered, iridescent scales, catching the starlight filtering through the fractured canopy, hinting at emerald and obsidian hues, even in the dimness. One wing was clearly broken, bent at a sickening angle, feathers torn and stained dark. An Aviaran, one of the Empire's dreaded aerial commandos, genetically engineered descendants of a conquered avian species, molded into perfect, merciless soldiers, feared throughout the outer colonies, rumored to be responsible for the final, brutal ground assaults on Meridian after the bombardment. Enemy. Pure, unadulterated enemy. The word screamed in his mind, dredging up images of fire and loss. He hesitated, pulse pounding in his ears. His orders were clear: avoid contact, or engage if necessary. Capture was a low priority, survival paramount. Leaving the pilot here guaranteed their death. The cold calculus of war demanded it. Yet, the non-standard signal, the catastrophic damage suggesting something more than a simple skirmish. He used his suit's laser cutter to carefully slice through a section of the buckled canopy frame, creating an opening large enough to access the cockpit. The air inside hissed out, a final, faint gasp of escaping atmosphere. He knelt beside the pilot. The helmet was cracked near the temple. With infinite reluctance, he eased it off. The face beneath was starkly pale against the dark uniform, features sharp, almost sculpted, framed by short-cut hair the color of midnight. Female. Impossibly young, younger than the hardened warriors depicted in resistance propaganda. Sweat and blood matted strands of hair to her forehead. Her breathing was a shallow, painful flutter in her chest. A deep, vicious wound marred her side. The flight suit soaked black with her lifeblood. Her wings, even damaged, possessed a terrible beauty, twitching now with faint, involuntary spasms. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened, dark eyes, unfocused, clouded with agony and the encroaching shock of the void. They drifted, then fixed on his faceplate, a flicker of awareness, recognition. Then, instantly, a surge of defiance, weak but unmistakable, hardening her features. Her lips parted, a dry, rasping sound escaping, too faint to be called a word. Hostility radiated from her, even in her near-death state. Enemy, kill her. The thought was instinctual, born of years of loss and hatred. She represented everything that had destroyed his life, his world. His hand tightened on his pulse pistol. It would be easy, justified. An act of war, an act of vengeance for Meridian, for Alara. But he saw the pain etched on her face, the rapid, shallow struggle for each breath. He saw the broken wing, the life ebbing from the wound in her side. He saw not the symbol, not the monster, but the individual, broken, dying, alone. The medkit on his thigh felt like lead. He couldn't. Vengeance felt hollow when faced with such immediate suffering. He made his choice, the weight of it settling instantly upon him, heavy and uncertain. "Hold still," he said, his voice rough, filtered through the suit's calm. "Going to get you out." He worked with a grim efficiency born of necessity, cutting the pilot's harness, his suit sensors giving him a clearer picture of her vitals. Critical. The wound was severe, likely internal bleeding. He quickly administered a broad-spectrum coagulant and a powerful painkiller from his kit, watching her eyes glaze slightly as the drug took hold. She watched him, her earlier defiance replaced by a confused, wary silence. He focused on stabilizing the wound, applying a pressure seal bandage. Lifting her was difficult. The wings, even folded and damaged, added awkward bulk. She gasped sharply as he maneuvered her, a raw sound of pain that cut through the comms. He carried her out of the ruined interceptor and across the narrow gap to the Stardust drifter, inside the airlock, as the pressure equalized, filling the small space with breathable air. The reality crashed down. He had an Imperial aviarin on board, an enemy soldier, and his fuel gauge was laughing at him. He converted the small cargo hold, clearing crates of non-essential supplies to make space, laying her gently on a pile of thermal blankets. He couldn't put her in the crew bunk. It felt too intimate, too wrong. He needed distance. Stripping off his helmet and gloves, he felt the air circulate, carrying the faint, alien scent of her, mingled with blood and ozone. Her breathing was slightly deeper, the coagulant and painkiller doing their work, but she was far from stable. He fetched his comprehensive medkit from the cockpit supplies, working under the stark glow of the cargo bay lights. He carefully cut away the blood-soaked fabric of her flight suit around the wound. The flesh beneath was torn raggedly, metal shards embedded deep. It needed cleansing, debridement, proper suturing, skills he barely possessed. He did his best, flushing the wound with antiseptic, carefully removing the debris, his stomach churning slightly. Her skin was cool, her pulse thready. He applied synth flesh sealant, reinforcing it with nutrient patches designed for trauma victims. Her wings lay unnaturally still, the broken one clearly needing specialized medical attention he couldn't provide. He covered her with another blanket, tucking it around her carefully. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open again, fixing on him. The fear was still there, but it was overlaid with a profound weariness. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, raw like scraped stone. Adam paused, looking down at her, at the enemy he had inexplicably saved. He had no answer that wouldn't sound like a lie or a fool's sentiment. "Rest," he said gruffly, turning away. "We need to find somewhere safe." He retreated to the cockpit, sealing the door between them, the silence amplifying the thrum of the engines and the frantic beating of his own heart. He needed to hide. Now, accessing his private star charts, One's not shared with the Resistance.network. He found it, a rogue moonlet, designated RS-47b, nestled deep within the chaotic embrace of the Veil Nebula nearby. An old smuggler's hideout he'd stumbled upon years ago, equipped with basic life support and atmospheric processors, completely off any official grid. It was their only chance. He set the course, the drifter changing vector once more, melting into the swirling, iridescent gases of the nebula, carrying its dangerous, impossible passenger into deeper shadow. RS-47b was less a moonlet, more a jagged shard of cosmic debris captured by the nebula's gravity, perpetually shrouded in curtains of ionized gas that played havoc with sensors. Adam navigated by memory and instinct, the external viewports showing only swirling chaos in shades of violet and crimson. He found the fissure, a near-invisible crack in the rock face, and deactivated the ancient holographic camouflage emitter. The rock shimmered and dissolved, revealing the dark maw of a docking bay entrance. He guided the drifter inside, the heavy outer doors grinding shut behind them, sealing them in artificial gravity and the low hum of machinery coming back online. The shelter was stark, functional, built for hiding, not comfort. A compact docking area, a central chamber serving as living space and control room, 2 small sleeping cells, a storage bay filled with aging emergency supplies, and a rudimentary med bay equipped with little more than a diagnostic scanner and sterile field generator. The air was cold, recycled, tasting faintly of ozone and dust. It felt utterly isolated, a pocket of stillness in a galaxy at war. He carried Ira. He'd found her designation, Flight Lieutenant Arakai, from a small metallic tag on her uniform, before covering her, from the cargo hold to the med bay's sturdier cot. The diagnostic scanner confirmed his fears: severe internal trauma, multiple fractures in the wing joint, critical blood loss. She needed regeneration therapy, advanced surgery, things far beyond this shelter's capabilities. He could only keep her stable, manage her pain, hope her alien physiology was resilient. She regained full consciousness as he was setting up in the 4th drip with nutrient fluids and broad-spectrum antibiotics. Her eyes snapped open, instantly alert, darting around the unfamiliar med bay, then locking onto him with fierce intensity. Panic flared briefly before being suppressed by visible effort. "Where is this place?" Her voice was stronger, sharper, laced with suspicion that bordered on hatred. "Emergency shelter," Adam replied, keeping his tone flat, professional. He gestured towards the scanner readings. "You're badly injured. Internal bleeding. Wing fracture. You need proper medical facilities. But this is the best I can do for now." "Safe," she scoffed, the word dripping with contempt. "With a human, a scavenger picking over Imperial wrecks." She tried to push herself up, a sharp hiss of pain escaping her lips as her broken wing protested. She fell back, glaring at him. "Why didn't you just leave me to die, or kill me? Isn't that what your kind does?" The accusation, laced with the memory of Meridian, stung. "Maybe," Adam admitted, his voice low. "Maybe I should have. But leaving someone to die in the void isn't my way. Not even an Imperial aviarin." He met her hostile gaze directly. "Right now, the Empire thinks you're dead. Whoever shot you down made sure of it. Out here, with me, you have a chance. Back there, you had none. That's the only why that matters." He checked the 4th drip, then turned to leave the small med bay. "Rest, heal. We'll figure out the rest later." He established a routine. Check the shelter systems, power, atmosphere, water reclamation, monitor comm channels, filtering the endless static for any hint of Imperial activity or news from the scattered resistance cells. Tend to Ira's injuries, changing dressings, monitoring her vitals, administering pain medication. He worked with a detached efficiency, keeping interactions minimal, clinical. He could feel her eyes on him constantly, tracking his movements. Her initial hostility slowly evolving into a guarded, calculating watchfulness. He saw the struggle within her, the ingrained imperial doctrine warring with the reality of her situation, the unexpected, impersonal care she was receiving from a hated enemy. He started leaving the med bay door open slightly when he worked in the main chamber, letting the sounds of his activity filter in, a subtle reminder that she wasn't entirely alone. He prepared concentrated nutrient paste, flavorless but effective, leaving it on a tray just inside her door without comment. At first, she refused it. Then, driven by necessity, she began to eat, slowly, reluctantly. They existed in a state of strained silence, two enemies thrown together by circumstance, circling each other warily in the confines of the hidden shelter. Adam found himself noticing small details, the way the iridescent sheen on her intact wing feathers seemed to shift color with her mood, from dark, stormy grays when she was in pain or angry, to softer blues and greens when she rested. The subtle, involuntary adjustments she made, trying to find a comfortable position for her damaged wing. The intelligence in her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking. Assessing him, assessing the shelter, undoubtedly calculating escape vectors or potential weaknesses. One cycle, a meteoroid storm swept through the nebula, the shelter's outer hull ringing with impacts from smaller debris. The lights flickered violently, and a section of the ceiling panel in the main chamber sparked and shorted out, plunging the room into near darkness, save for the emergency strips. A low groan echoed through the structure, a larger impact. Somewhere near the power conduits, Adam grabbed a toolkit and emergency lantern, heading towards the junction box. Report. Ira's voice came from the med bay doorway. She was standing, leaning heavily against the frame, her face tight with pain but alert. Micrometeoroid impacts, Adam said, prying open the smoking panel. Fused wires. Damaged relays. Took out a primary power conduit. Backup power is holding. But it won't last indefinitely if the main feed is compromised. Let me see. She pushed herself away from the door frame, moving slowly, deliberately towards him. She swayed, and he instinctively put out a hand to steady her arm. Her skin felt feverish. She flinched at his touch but didn't pull away, her dark eyes meeting his in the dim emergency lighting. A spark of something unreadable passed between them. Shared peril, perhaps, or just the animal instinct to cooperate for survival. She leaned closer, examining the damaged conduits, her breath warm against his cheek. Her scent, sharp and alien, filled his senses. Imperial interceptors use tri-redundant power routing, she murmured, her voice low, almost hypnotic. The auxiliary bus should bypass this junction if the primary relay is fused. Look for the tertiary capacitor bank, following her guidance, tracing wires he hadn't initially considered. Adam found the bypass relay. It was fused solid from the power surge. It's welded shut. Heat application, she instructed. Precise. Too much will damage the adjacent insulators. He used a micro-torch from his kit, the tiny flame casting dancing shadows on their faces. Ira directed him, her voice calm and precise despite the tremors of pain running through her. There, hold it. Steady. Now. The relay clicked free. Lights flickered back to full intensity as the main power rerouted. They stood for a moment in the restored brightness, the shared task creating a temporary bridge across the chasm of their enmity. Impressive, Adam conceded, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his glove. You know your systems. Ira looked away, a shadow crossing her face. Efficiency is paramount. Failure is unacceptable. She turned and limped slowly back towards the med bay, the fragile connection dissolving as quickly as it had formed. But the dynamic had shifted, subtly. They had faced a problem together, relied on each other's expertise. A seed of grudging respect had been planted in the barren ground of their distrust. Adam expanded his comm monitoring. Using algorithms, Ira subtly helped him refine, tapping into deeper Imperial military frequencies. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. News of her squadron, search patterns, anything. He picked up fragments, heavily encrypted, routed through secure channels. He spent hours running decryption sequences, the shelter's aging computer core groaning under the strain. Finally, he broke through a layer of encoding on a series of burst transmissions, flagged with the highest priority markers. The words that emerged made his blood run cold. Operation Cinderfall. Phase 1 authorization. Planetary resonance destabilization. Primary targets: Olympus City, Peaport Haven, Meridian Restoration Zone. Meridian. They were targeting Meridian again. And the new term, resonance destabilization, sounded infinitely more terrifying than simple bombardment. Dates scrolled past. Synchronization sequence initiated. Deployment vessel Harbinger en route. The timeline was horrifyingly short. Days, maybe less. This wasn't just an attack. It was an extermination plan on a scale he couldn't comprehend. He felt dizzy. Leaning against the console for support, he looked towards the medbay. Ira was awake, watching him, her expression unreadable. Had she known? Was this why her squadron was purged? Because they knew about Cinderfall and couldn't stomach it? Or was she part of the plan? Her crash a ruse? The paranoia, never far beneath the surface, surged back. He walked towards her, the decrypted fragments burning on the datapad in his hand. He stopped in the doorway, holding it out wordlessly. Ira looked at the datapad, then up at his face, her own pale and drawn. She didn't need to read it. He saw the confirmation in her eyes, the flicker of profound horror she couldn't quite conceal. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were filled with a terrible, weary certainty. "I suspected," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Rumors, purged data streams, commanders whispering about the final solution to the human problem. She took a shaky breath. Resonance destabilization. It's a theoretical weapon class, designed not just to shatter shields, but to use harmonic frequencies to liquefy planetary mantles, trigger catastrophic core collapse. Her gaze met his, stark and filled with self-loathing. They intend to shatter worlds, Adam, wipe them from existence, starting with the colonies that defied them most vigorously. Meridian, Olympus, Haven. Her voice broke slightly. My squadron. We escorted science vessels near the testing grounds months ago. We were told they were sensor calibration trials. We saw anomalies, seismic spikes, unexplained energy blooms. We reported them. We were ordered to scrub the logs, debriefed under extreme security protocols. She looked down at her hands. Then came the transfer orders to this quiet patrol sector, the ambush. The pieces slammed together with brutal clarity. She hadn't just been purged for dissent. She'd been silenced because she was an accidental witness to the Cinderfall weapons development. This is why they tried to kill me. This is what they don't want anyone to know. We have to warn the resistance, Adam said, the urgency making his voice tight. We have to get this data out. Ira shook her head, a gesture of despair. A warning is useless without proof, without understanding the mechanism. They'll dismiss it as fear-mongering. And the weapon, it's designed to be unstoppable by conventional means. She pushed herself fully upright, ignoring the searing pain from her side and wing, her eyes blazing with a desperate, newfound purpose. There's only one place the full operational data, the resonance frequencies, the deployment schedule, the Harbinger's technical specifications will be stored securely. The Sector Command Central Archive on Station Delphi. Adam stared at her as if she'd sprouted another pair of wings. Delphi. Ira. That's the Sector Fleet headquarters. It's a fortress. We'd be vaporized before we got within 10 parsecs. My command codes, though flagged, might still grant access to peripheral systems if we can mask our approach, she countered, her voice regaining some of its commanding tone. I know the station layout, the network protocols, the security blind spots. I supervised system upgrades there 2 cycles ago. She stepped closer, her gaze intense. I can map the infiltration route. I know how to access the archive core. But I can't fly the drifter through layered patrols and penetrate station defenses. I don't have the technical skills to bypass the physical security measures you possess. Her voice dropped, becoming almost pleading. I need you, Adam. We need you. It's the only way to give the colonies a fighting chance. The sheer insanity of it was breathtaking. Infiltrate the most secure Imperial installation in the sector. Steal data on a planet-killing weapon. Just the 2 of them, in a battered freighter, with her barely able to stand. It was less than a suicide mission. It was evaporation. Yet, the image of Meridian shattering, of Olympus and Haven facing the same fate. Ilara's face. He looked at Ira, saw the burning resolve forged in betrayal and horror, saw the desperate hope that she, an enemy soldier, was placing in him, her human counterpart. The enemy of my enemy. It felt far more complex than that now. It felt like the only choice left in a galaxy gone mad. All right, he heard himself say, the word tasting like ozone and fear. All right, Ira, tell me about Delphi. Tell me everything. In the heart of the nebula, surrounded by the swirling ghosts of dead stars, an impossible alliance solidified. An Imperial defector and a human survivor, united by the impending threat of annihilation, began plotting a mission into the dragon's lair. Their escape from the nebula would be the first test. Getting out of the Veil Nebula undetected was harder than getting in. Imperial probes, likely searching for Ira's wreckage or any sign of survivors, now swept the nebula's edges with alarming frequency. Adam pushed the drifter's stealth systems to their absolute limit, running on minimal power. Drifting through sensor blind spots, Era identified by monitoring the probe's search patterns and predicting their paths based on standard Imperial doctrine. She sat strapped into the co-pilot seat, pale and grim-faced, her injured wing tightly bound, calling out adjustments, her voice a low, tense murmur against the background hum of the ship. Probe Squadron Delta 4 approaching, bearing 090, she reported, eyes glued to a secondary display showing decrypted Imperial tactical chatter, engaging wide-spectrum scan, divert power from inertial dampeners to sensor baffling, vent plasma coolant starboard, create a temporary thermal ghost. Adam complied instantly, the ship vibrating slightly as the dampeners weakened. Outside, a cloud of superheated gas billowed from a side vent, mimicking the signature of a minor nebula energy discharge. They held their breath as the probe swept past, their active scans washing over the drifter without triggering an alarm. They remained hidden, a mote of dust in the cosmic storm. Minutes later, Ira let out a slow breath. Clear. They're continuing their grid search. The escape took 3 agonizing cycles, a nerve-wracking ballet of silent running, sudden course corrections, and carefully timed emissions masking. They encountered wreckage from old skirmishes, navigated fields of charged particles that threatened to overload their shields, and once had to power down completely, drifting dead in space for hours while a heavy cruiser passed nearby on a deep patrol vector. The tension was a physical presence in the cockpit, punctuated only by Era's clipped instructions and the pounding of Adam's own heart. During one close call, when a fast-moving scout vessel deviated from its expected path and headed directly towards them, Ira, overriding Adam's instinct to make a desperate run for it, suddenly transmitted a burst of coded static on an old Aviaran military frequency. The scout abruptly changed course, veering away as if recalled. Adam stared at her. What was that? Old emergency squadron recall code, Ira said, her expression unreadable, long obsolete, probably registered as system interference or a sensor ghost on their outdated equipment. A gamble, one that paid off, Adam conceded, impressed despite himself. Her intimate knowledge of the Imperial machine was their greatest asset, and their greatest source of mutual suspicion. Could she truly have abandoned all loyalty? Could he truly trust her? The questions lingered, unspoken, in the charged silence between them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they slipped out of the nebula's obscuring embrace and back into relatively open, albeit hostile, space. The coordinates for the resistance base, Vigilance, burned on the navigation screen. Delphi lay in the opposite direction, deep within Imperial territory. First, they had to deliver the warning, such as it was, and convince the resistance that Era wasn't a Trojan horse. That fight, Adam suspected, might be almost as dangerous as infiltrating Delphi itself. Asteroid base Vigilance was buried deep within the Procyon sector's densest asteroid cluster, a phantom hidden within a storm of rock and ice. Ira's fragmented resistance codes, combined with Adam's older clearance identifiers, eventually yielded the correct handshake sequence, a section of what looked like solid rock face, kilometers wide, irised open, revealing the softly lit docking bay within. Adam eased the battered Stardust drifter into the allocated berth, the magnetic clamps engaging with a familiar thud. The moment the ramp lowered, the atmosphere shifted. Hard-faced resistance fighters, clad in patched-up gear, ceased their work, turning as one, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. The sight of Adam was expected, another freelancer returning. The sight of Ira stepping out behind him, her wings folded but unmistakable, her bearing still holding echoes of Imperial discipline, despite her injuries and makeshift clothing, caused a wave of shock and anger to ripple through the bay. Rifles were raised, shouts of Aviaran, and Imperial spy echoed off the metal walls. "Hold your fire!" Adam yelled, stepping firmly between Ira and the bristling weapons. "She's a defector. She has critical intelligence." Code Cinderfall. The name, meaningless to the rank and file, nonetheless caused a stir. A commanding figure pushed through the throng. Commander Valerius, her face etched with the weariness of command, her eyes sharp and assessing. She took in the scene, Adam, protective, Ira, standing tall despite the obvious pain and the hostile reception, the raised weapons. Her gaze lingered on AYRA, missing nothing. "Cinderfall," she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "Explain, now." The briefing room was cold, functional, smelling faintly of recycled air and stale adrenaline. Commander Valerius sat at the head of the table, flanked by Kyle, her gaunt intelligence chief whose eyes seemed to pierce through deception, and Riggs, the burly, heavily scarred tactical officer whose hatred for all things Imperial, especially Aviarans, radiated palpably. Guards stood by the door, their focus entirely on Ira. The distrust was a physical force. Adam laid out their story first, keeping it concise: the signal, the rescue, the shelter, the intercepted fragments pointing to Cinderfall. Then Ira spoke. She detailed Operation Cinderfall, the resonance weapon, the target list including Meridian, the Harbinger, her squadron's fate, her reasons for defecting. She spoke with a chilling precision, laying bare the Empire's genocidal plan. She didn't plead or embellish, she stated facts. Her voice steady despite the pain medication wearing off and the open hostility she faced. Kale listened intently, making notes on a data pad, his expression thoughtful but skeptical. Riggs sneered openly. Planet-killing resonance weapons, purge squadrons conveniently found by lone freighter pilots. This stinks like an Imperial trap, Commander. She feeds us nightmare fuel to make us panic, drop our guard. And what would be the strategic advantage in revealing the existence and nature of a top-secret weapon? Lieutenant Riggs, Ira countered coolly, meeting his glare without flinching. Why warn you of an attack I could have simply allowed to happen? Why risk my life escaping Imperial space only to walk into yours, to sow dissent, to infiltrate our command structure? Riggs shot back. Aviarans are masters of deceit, engineered that way. Enough. Riggs. Valerius cut in sharply, though her own eyes remained wary. She turned to Kale. Intel analysis. Kale sighed. The Cinderfall designation is unknown in our databases. Resonance weapon theory exists, but we have no confirmation of Imperial development, let alone deployment. Her story aligns with certain patterns of internal Imperial purges we've observed, but it's circumstantial. Her knowledge of high-level protocols seems genuine, but could be part of an elaborate deception. He looked at Ira. The risk is extreme. The risk of inaction is annihilation. Ira stated flatly, I understand your distrust. I offer the only way to verify my claims and obtain the means to counter this threat. Station Delphi, the Sector Command Archive. The complete data is there. Send us. Delphi. Riggs exploded. You want us to give an Imperial agent, a bird, access to one of our stealth ships to fly into the heart of their command? It's suicide, or worse, betrayal. She won't be alone, Adam said firmly. I'll pilot. I know the Drifter's systems, and I can adapt to the Nightshade. She navigates, handles Imperial protocols, accesses the archive. We go together. Valerius steepled her fingers, her gaze distant, weighing the impossible odds. The potential catastrophe against the sliver of hope Era represented. The silence stretched, thick with tension. Finally, she looked at AYRA, her eyes hard as diamonds. You understand that if this is a trap, if you deviate in any way, Pilot Adam has standing orders to terminate you immediately, and that every soul lost as a result of your potential betrayal will be on your head. Ira met her gaze levelly. I understand, Commander. I accept the terms. Let my actions prove my intent. Valerius nodded curtly. Kale tapped the Nightshade. Stealth configuration. Full infiltration package. Riggs. She ignored his sputtering protest. Outfit them. Top-tier gear. Minimal signature. You have 36 standard hours until Cinderfall's projected initiation. Wheels up in 2. She stood, dismissing them. May whatever gods you believe in watch over you both. You'll need it. As they left the briefing room, Riggs deliberately bumped Ira's shoulder, hard enough to make her stumble and gasp in pain. Don't get any ideas, Bird, he snarled under his breath. One wrong move. Adam moved protectively beside Ira, glaring at Riggs, but said nothing. The lines were drawn. They had their mission. But the enemy wasn't just waiting at Delphi. The Nightshade lived up to its name. a sliver of absolute black against the starfield, its drive signature barely registering even on their own internal sensors. Adam piloted it with intense concentration, the advanced controls far more sensitive than the drifter's sluggish helm. Station Delphi grew from a point of light into a monstrous structure, a city in space, bristling with antennae, weapon turrets, and docking arms extending like greedy tentacles. Shuttles and patrol craft buzzed around it like angry insects. Getting close required navigating overlapping sensor nets and patrol corridors. Ira, strapped in beside him, monitored the complex web of Imperial traffic, her fingers dancing over her console. Command Carrier Indomitable is launching its fighter wing for Patrol Sweep Epsilon, she reported, her voice low and calm despite the proximity to the Imperial behemoth. Creates a temporary sensor shadow between arrays 7 and 8. Near maintenance conduit Gamma Prime. Window narrows to 15 seconds. 15 seconds, Adam breathed, maneuvering the nightshade with micro-thruster bursts, aligning for the impossibly tight gap. You sure about this? Gamma Prime offers direct access to the lower service levels, bypassing 3 security checkpoints, Ira stated. It's the optimal insertion point. He didn't argue, trusting her knowledge. He pushed the small ship forward, hugging the station's massive hull, slipping into the fleeting sensor blind spot just as the fighter wing roared past overhead. Silent magnetic clamps engaged on the hull plating near the designated conduit. They were attached, invisible. For now, they donned the sleek black infiltration suits Riggs had grudgingly provided. Advanced personal cloaking, multi-spectrum visors, integrated comms, silenced energy pistols, and an array of specialized decryption and bypass tools. Ira carried the data spike, her face set in grim lines. They cycled through the Nightshade's miniature airlock, emerging onto the station's hull, the sheer scale of the structure dizzying below them. They moved quickly towards the conduit access panel. Standard mag lock, encrypted bolts, biosignature scanner. Ira assessed, already interfacing her wrist-mounted console. Her old command codes opened the first layer. Adam used a scrambler to confuse the bioscanner, feeding it looped all clear data scavenged from public comms traffic. The heavy bolts retracted with soft clicks. The panel slid open into darkness. Remember, Ira whispered over their private comm link as they slipped inside the narrow, echoing shaft. Internal sensors are less dense here, but random sweeps occur and sound carries. They move through the station's metallic bowels, a maze of pipes, conduits, and access ways. Following the route Ira had memorized from archived schematics, the airlock leading from the maintenance ways into the station proper was formidable. Reinforced plating, laser grid emitters, atmospheric sensors, and a high-level biometric scanner. This is where my codes will fail, Ira stated, already working on the control panel. As predicted, red lights flashed. Flagged. Security alert triggered. Level 1. Unauthorized access attempt at maintenance junction Gamma Prime. How long? Adam asked, scanning the corridor behind them. Working. Layered encryption. Security protocols rerouting. Alarms began a low, insistent chime further down the maintenance shaft. Footsteps echoed, growing louder. They're coming! Almost. Need processing boost. Adam linked his suit's more powerful computer to hers, their combined power attacking the stubborn lock. The laser grid deactivated. The biometric scanner flashed green, overridden. The door hissed open. Go! Ira shoved him through, diving after him, slapping the emergency closure panel as the first stun bolts sizzled against the ceiling door. They were inside. A low-lit service corridor stretched before them. Alert upgraded. Level 3. Ira reported breathlessly, checking her console. Sector lockdown imminent. They know someone's inside, likely heading coreward. Patrols converging. Archive level. 2 levels down. We need to move. Now. They ran, using side corridors, ducking into alcoves as patrols double-timed past. The station intercom crackled to life. Intruder alert. Unidentified hostile elements detected in Service Sector Beta. All units maintain vigilance. Proceed with containment protocols. The station felt like it was closing in around them. They reached the archive sector junction. Blast doors, thick enough to withstand torpedo impacts, sealed the corridor. Laser grids crisscrossed the approach. 2 heavily armed Imperial sentinels stood guard, their helmets emotionless, rifles held at the ready. No way through without engaging, Adam murmured. Ira nodded grimly. On my mark. She activated her personal cloak. Adam did the same. They became shimmering distortions in the air. Ira tossed a small pellet down a side corridor. It emitted a shower of sparks and corrosive smoke, simulating a chemical leak as the sentinels turned, momentarily distracted. Ira surged forward, incredibly fast even with her injuries. She moved like a phantom, disabling the first sentinel with a precise strike to the neck joint, while Adam tackled the second, using a nerve jammer pulse from his gauntlet to overload the guard's suit systems, causing him to collapse unconscious. They dragged the bodies quickly into the smoky side corridor. Ira was already at the blast door console. Highest level clearance required. Biometrics locked to sector command staff. She held up the data spike. Plan B. The fail-safe virus. It initiates a full system diagnostic and reboot cycle across the central core, momentarily disabling security lockdowns on archive access. Gives us maybe 90 seconds, but it triggers maximum alert. Station-wide red alert. Every available guard will converge here. It's the only way, Adam said, bracing himself. Do it. Ira took a deep breath, her knuckles white as she gripped the spike, and plugged it into the console. Warning runes flashed across the screen. She confirmed the command sequence. Immediately, klaxons blared deafeningly throughout the entire station. Emergency lighting strobed violently, bathing everything in blood-red light. Maximum alert. Core security breach detected. Containment protocol Omega engaged. The station's synthesized voice roared, shaking the very deck plates. The massive blast doors groaned, then slid open. 90 seconds. Ira yelled over the din, sprinting into the archive chamber. It was a cathedral of light and information, cylindrical, impossibly vast, glowing columns of data stretching up into darkness, humming with contained power. A central console pulsed invitingly. Ira slammed the data spike into the interface port. Transfer protocols initiated. Encryption layers peeled back under the virus's onslaught. Searching. Cinderfall files located. Accessing. Heavy encryption. Brute forcing. Counter protocols. Progress bars filled agonizingly slowly on her holographic display. 60 seconds, Adam shouted, watching the blast doors. Pulse pistol raised. Heavy boot steps pounded outside. Shouts. Commands. The clang of magnetic clamps as heavy weapons were deployed. Come on, come on. Ira urged the machine. 30 seconds. They're setting up breaching charges. Sparks flew from the edges of the blast doors. Data packets secured. Got it. Ira ripped the spike free as the transfer completed. Move. They bolted back towards the entrance just as the blast doors began. Their inexorable slides shut. Explosions rocked the corridor outside. They threw themselves through the narrowing gap, rolling as they hit the deck plating on the other side. Mere instants before the doors sealed with a final, definitive boom. They were trapped in the archive access corridor, with Imperial forces battering down the door behind them and unknown numbers converging from the other end. The shaft, Adam pointed to a heavy ventilation grate Era had noted earlier, working frantically together, straining against the heavy bolts. They wrenched it open as the sound of plasma cutters biting into the blast door grew louder. Omega Protocol means they vent atmosphere in compromised sectors, Ira gasped, pulling herself into the dark opening. We need to get clear. They scrambled into the ventilation shaft, crawling blindly through the darkness. The roar of the klaxons and the muffled sounds of the assault on the archive fading slightly behind them. The escape had only just begun, and the entire station was now hunting them. Crawling through the suffocating darkness of the ventilation shafts was a nightmare. The station's lockdown protocols meant firewalls slammed shut at irregular intervals, forcing them into ever smaller, dustier auxiliary conduits. The air grew thin and metallic as Sector Command initiated atmospheric purging sequences in adjacent areas. Below them, through the grates, they saw corridors swarming with troopers, beams from searchlights cutting through the emergency lighting. They were rats in a trap, and the exterminators were closing in. Ira, despite her obvious pain, checked the data spike constantly, her face illuminated by the soft glow of its display. Adam, the resonance frequencies. They're keyed to specific geological strata found primarily on Terran-type worlds. It's not just indiscriminate destruction. It's specifically engineered to eradicate human colony worlds while minimizing damage to potentially valuable mineral resources. Her voice was thick with disgust. And the failsafe. If the primary target's defenses prove too strong, the Harbinger is authorized to initiate a cascading overload, potentially triggering sympathetic resonance across the entire sector's subspace network. It could destabilize dozens of systems. The calculated monstrosity of it was staggering. It wasn't just genocide, it was ecological warfare on a cosmic scale, with humans as the designated pest species. We have to get this out, Adam gritted out, forcing himself forward through a narrow constriction. They eventually reached a shaft junction overlooking Docking Bay 7. Below, the bay was chaos. Guards swarmed the area. Technicians swept every surface with advanced sensors, and magnetic grapples were being prepared to forcibly detach any unauthorized vessel. The Nightshade, despite its stealth capabilities, wouldn't remain hidden for long under this level of scrutiny. No way back to the ship, Adam stated the obvious. Ira scanned the station schematics still active on her console. Emergency Life Pod Bay E14. 3 levels up, outer ring section. Minimal security personnel assigned during Omega Protocol. Assumes personnel are either dead or contained. Pods have limited range. Minimal defenses, Adam pointed out. But they have independent comm systems, Ira countered. We can tight beam the data to Vigilance before they track the pod's launch. It was their only option. They navigated the treacherous upper shafts, bypassing security patrols, enduring sections where the air was almost too thin to breathe even with suit filters. They finally reached the deserted, red-lit emergency pod bay. Dozens of pods lined the walls like dormant seeds. They scrambled into the nearest one, a cramped 2-person sphere, strapping themselves into the acceleration couches. Ira immediately plugged the data spike into the pod's comm interface, establishing encrypted link to Vigilance frequency. Signal weak through station interference. Boosting transmission power. Data streamed across her display, sending Cinderfall packet. Now, the burst transmission lasted less than 5 seconds. Got confirmation, Ira yelled. Vigilance received the data. Adam slammed his fist onto the launch control. With a bone-jarring jolt, the pod ejected from Station Delphi, miniature thrusters firing, accelerating desperately away from the Imperial fortress. Instantly, alarms shrieked inside the tiny pod. Red proximity warnings flashed. Launch detected. Multiple fighter signatures converging, Adam yelled, grabbing the rudimentary flight controls. Hold on! The pod bucked and swerved as laser fire erupted around it. Brilliant crimson beams searing the void. Adam flew on pure instinct, dodging and weaving, the pod shaking violently from near misses and atmospheric detonations. Sleek Imperial interceptors closed in with terrifying speed, their cannons spitting death. Shields failing, Ira shouted, tracking the incoming threats. Two on the stern are locked. Suddenly, a streak of impossible blackness materialized between them and the pursuing fighters. The Nightshade, its cannons erupted, spewing bolts of plasma that tore into the lead interceptors, sending them tumbling away as blossoms of fire. Kale's voice, impossibly calm, crackled over the pod's comm. Commander Valerius felt you might require extraction assistance. Tractor beam engaged. Try not to scratch the paint. Adam matched the pod's velocity to the stealth ship's, relief washing over him in a dizzying wave. Powerful tractor beams locked onto the small sphere, pulling it smoothly into the Nightshade's open cargo bay, just as another volley of laser fire scorched the pod's hull. The bay door sealed, plunging them into blessed silence and safety. Kale didn't waste a microsecond, engaging the enhanced stealth drive. The Nightshade simply vanished, leaving the remaining Imperial fighters circling empty space, robbed of their prey. They had the data. They had the proof. They were alive. Now, the race was on to get back to Vigilance before the Harbinger reached its targets. The return journey was a blur of maximum warp and silent running. Kale pushed the Nightshade to its absolute limits, the experimental drive straining. Back at Vigilance, the verified Cinderfall data ignited a firestorm. Terror mingled with grim resolve. Commander Valerius ordered immediate dissemination of the core warning across every known channel: resistance, civilian, neutral, even leaking it into Imperial networks. Ira identified as potentially receptive to dissent. The technical details of the resonance weapon were shared only with Allied engineers and scientists working frantically on countermeasures. Ira, exhausted but driven, recorded a second message, this one deeply personal, describing the planet-killing weapon, confirming the Empire's horrific intentions, and making a direct appeal to other Aviarans. I saw the schematics, her voice, raw with emotion but unwavering, broadcast across the sector. This is not war, it is extermination. The empire you serve intends to shatter worlds, starting with innocent colonies. Is this the order you swore to uphold? Is this the legacy you wish for our people? The legacy of planet killers? There is honor in duty, but there is no honor in genocide. Choose. Choose life. Choose defiance. Join us. Help us stop this madness. The response was immediate and chaotic. Human colonies scrambled defenses, initiated evacuations, their fear now solidified by terrifying proof. And within the Empire, Era's message struck a chord. Reports trickled into Vigilance of Aviaran units refusing orders, of skirmishes between loyalists and dissenters, of small groups deserting, attempting the perilous flight towards rumored resistance havens. Vigilance itself transformed into a fortress preparing for siege. Every available hand worked, reinforcing bulkheads, charging weapon capacitors, prepping fighters. Ira, despite needing urgent medical attention for her still healing injuries, refused to rest. She worked alongside Riggs, who now regarded her with a grudging, wary respect born of their shared ordeal, analyzing the Harbinger's technical readouts. identifying potential weaknesses in the resonance emitters, devising shield modulation tactics that might, just might, offer some protection. Adam found himself overseeing the arming of every available ship, including the Stardust Drifter, fitting it with heavy repeating cannons scavenged from a wrecked patrol boat. He would fly. He owed Meridian that much. The waiting was the worst part, the silence pregnant with impending violence. Then, exactly on schedule, the Imperial fleet warped into the system. Not just a task force, but a full battle group, dozens of cruisers and destroyers materializing like ghosts, forming an inescapable cordon around the asteroid belt. And at their center, radiating malevolent power, was the Harbinger, its grotesque resonance emitters already beginning to glow with nascent, world-breaking energy. The final battle had begun. All hands, battle stations. This is not a drill. Valerius's voice echoed through vigilance, steel overlaying the strain. Pilots, launch, ground teams, defensive positions, IRA, command center. Adam sprinted for the drifter, the deck vibrating beneath his boots from the klaxons and the distant rumble of powering weapon systems. Ira intercepted him near the hangar bay doors, grabbing his arm, her eyes, dark and intense, locked with his. Pain, fear, determination, and something else, something deeper, warred in her gaze. Fly safe, Adam, she said, her voice tight. You too, Ira, he replied, squeezing her hand briefly. Show them what true defiance looks like. He vaulted into the drifter's familiar cockpit, the smell of worn synth leather and hot wiring a strange comfort. Engines roared to life. Ira watched him go for a heartbeat, then turned, her damaged wing held stiffly, and raced towards the command center. There, she would coordinate not only the human defenders, but also the small, determined band of Aviaran defectors who had arrived in the past few days. Warriors now fighting against the empire they once served, their loyalties reforged in the fire of conscience. Adam launched the drifter into utter chaos. Space became a lethal light show, streams of plasma, pulses of laser fire, blossoming explosions where fighters met their end. Vigilance's own defense batteries opened up, spitting defiance at the Imperial behemoths. Adam plunged into the dogfight, the old freighter handling better than expected with the combat upgrades. He targeted swarms of Imperial interceptors, trying to draw fire away from the nimbler, more heavily armed resistance fighters making attack runs on the destroyers screening the Harbinger. Comms chatter filled his helmet, frantic calls, damage reports, cries of pain, orders shouted over the din. Below, within the asteroid's labyrinthine tunnels and surface fortifications, the battle was just as fierce. Imperial dropships braved the defensive fire, disgorging waves of stormtroopers who were met with brutal resistance. Ira, coordinating from the holographic tactical display in the command center, directed squads to critical breaches, her knowledge of Imperial ground assault tactics proving invaluable. She sent the Aviaran defectors, led by a grim-faced veteran named Kalen, to intercept elite Imperial commandos attempting to sabotage the main shield generators. The defectors used the confined spaces and vertical shafts to their advantage, their wings granting them unparalleled mobility, hitting the Imperials with surgical, lightning-fast strikes. Ira watched their biosignatures on the display, her heart aching for the danger they faced, fighting their own kind. The Harbinger, protected by its escorts, continued its slow, inexorable advance towards vigilance, its resonance emitters glowing brighter, an unholy hum beginning to penetrate even shielded comm channels. All attack craft, concentrate fire on the Harbinger's primary emitters, Valerius commanded. Focus on the power regulation nodes Era identified. We need to disrupt the resonance sequence. Adam peeled off from his dogfight, ignoring the fighters on his tail, and lined up a run on the monstrous vessel. He saw the nodes Ira had marked, junctions where energy conduits fed the massive emitters. He opened fire, heavy cannon bolts slamming into the reinforced hull alongside missiles and laser fire from dozens of other resistance ships. Explosions rippled across the Harbinger's flank near the emitters. Warning lights flashed on his console as an Imperial fighter scored hits on his aft shields. He jinked, hard, diving back into the melee. The glow from the Harbinger's emitters flickered, dimmed slightly, but didn't extinguish. They were damaging it, but not enough. Not yet. Suddenly, a priority alert flashed from Era. Adam! Imperial breach. Sector Gamma! They're trying to overload the atmospheric processors. Kalen's team is pinned down. Need immediate fire support on surface coordinates. Grid 7 Gamma. On my way. Adam dove the drifter towards the asteroid's surface, dodging defensive fire from both sides. Skimming low over the pockmarked rock, he saw the firefight. Kalen and his handful of defectors holding a desperate perimeter around the processor complex entrance against overwhelming numbers of Imperial troopers backed by heavy walkers. Adam opened up with his cannons, strafing the Imperial lines, sending troopers scattering, buying the defenders precious seconds. One of the walkers turned its heavy laser towards him. He pulled it up hard, the beam searing the rock where he'd been moments before. The Harbinger, meanwhile, fired. Not the full, planet-shattering pulse, but a targeted, lower power resonance burst aimed directly at Vigilance's primary shield generator. The asteroid shuddered violently. Lights flickered throughout the base. A wave of nauseating dissonance washed through Adam's cockpit. Shields buckled across the resistance fleet. Several smaller frigates simply disintegrated under the strain. Vigilance's main shield held, but glowed ominously, clearly weakened. Shields down to 40%, Kale reported from the command center. Another hit like that, and we're finished. Panic began to set in on the comms, but Era's voice cut through it, calm and commanding. All units, maintain discipline. Focus fire on those emitters. Ground teams, hold your positions. Reinforce Sector Gamma. Her presence, her unwavering resolve, steadied them. Adam, seeing Kalen's team still under heavy pressure, made a risky decision. He swung the drifter around, lining up on the remaining walker, and flew directly at it, cannons blazing, forcing the pilot to focus on him instead of the defenders. Laser fire impacted his forward shields, overloading them. Alarms screamed. He fired one last, desperate volley, hitting the walker's vulnerable leg joint, sending it crashing down. Before pulling up sharply, his ship shuddering from multiple system failures. He had minimal power, failing shields, and fighters closing in. Just as he thought he was finished, 3 Aviaran figures swooped past his cockpit, firing energy bolts from wrist-mounted weapons, driving off the pursuing Imperial fighters. Kalen's team, having routed the ground troops thanks to his diversion, had taken to the air. Kalen gave him a curt nod over the comms before diving back towards the surface battle. The tide, almost imperceptibly, began to turn. The damage to the Harbinger's emitters, combined with frantic shield modulations based on Ira's data, seemed to be preventing it from achieving a full power lock. Imperial ground forces were bogged down in brutal tunnel fighting against determined defenders and the surprisingly effective Aviaran defectors. The Imperial commander, facing unacceptable losses, a damaged superweapon, and unexpectedly resilient defenses, made the only logical choice. The order went out, disengage. Fleet withdrawal pattern Delta. The massive Imperial ships began pulling back, firing parting shots, their fighters screening their retreat. The immediate assault was over. Vigilance, battered and bleeding, still stood. A collective, ragged cheer echoed through the comm channels, quickly replaced by the somber reality of counting the cost. The space around Vigilance was a graveyard of shattered ships. The asteroid base itself bore deep scars, entire sections depressurized, fires burning in others. Adam managed to limp the crippled Stardust drifter back to the docking bay, the ship groaning and venting atmosphere. He practically fell out of the cockpit, exhausted, bruised, but alive. Medics rushed past, ferrying wounded on stretchers. The air tasted of smoke, blood, and victory's bitter price. He searched the crowds, his heart tight with anxiety, until he saw her. Ira stood near the bay entrance, conferring with Commander Valerius and Kalen. Her flight suit was scorched, her face smudged with grime, her injured wing held even more stiffly. But her eyes shone with fierce pride and relief. She saw him, excused herself, and walked towards him, limping slightly. "Adam," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. They stood facing each other for a long moment amidst the organized chaos. The unsaid passing between them. He saw the cost of command in her eyes, the grief for those lost under her direction, both human and Aviaran. She saw the bone-deep weariness in his posture, the ghosts of Meridian still lurking behind his relief. "You were magnificent, Ira," he said softly. A faint smile touched her lips. "We held," she replied simply. "Together." In the difficult days that followed, Vigilance became a beacon. News of the failed Cinderfall assault and the Empire's retreat spread. More defectors arrived, Aviarans disillusioned by the genocidal orders. Even some human Imperial Navy personnel unwilling to serve a regime that would shatter worlds. The asteroid base became a melting pot, fragile and fraught with tension, but held together by a shared enemy and the burgeoning hope for something different. Humans and Aviarans worked shoulder to shoulder, clearing debris, repairing systems, mourning the dead. Under the joint leadership of Valerius and AYRA, tentative steps were taken towards building a true alliance. Protocols established. Councils formed. It was slow. Difficult work. Mistrust lingering like shadows. But the foundation was being laid. One quiet evening cycle, Adam found Ira in the newly repaired observation dome, gazing out at the star-dusted tapestry of the nebula beyond the asteroid field. The reconstruction efforts continued outside, but here, a measure of peace reigned. He stood beside her, following her gaze. "They fear us, you know," Ira murmured, her voice barely disturbing the silence. "Some of your people, some of mine. They see the uniform I used to wear, the wings I bear, and they see the enemy. They also see the soldier who stood against genocide," Adam replied, turning to look at her. "The commander who held the line, the leader who offers a different path." He gently touched her arm, feeling the warmth beneath the fabric, the slight tremor of fatigue. "It takes time, Ira. Trust isn't built in a day, especially not after generations of war." She leaned into his touch almost imperceptibly, a sigh escaping her. "I spent my life following orders, Adam, believing in the structure, the necessity of the Empire. Now, this path is uncertain, forged one step at a time, but you're choosing the steps," he said. "We are. Not orders, not hatred. Choice, compassion." He hesitantly reached out, brushing a stray strand of dark hair from her face. Her skin was soft beneath his calloused fingers. She met his gaze, her dark eyes searching his, finding understanding, acceptance, and something more. The war wasn't over. The Empire, though wounded and perhaps fragmenting, remained a powerful force. The future was uncertain, perilous, but here, in the quiet darkness of the observation dome, two souls, once divided by hatred and war, found solace and strength in each other. He leaned down, and she met him halfway, their lips meeting in a kiss that spoke of shared ordeals, fragile hope, and a future they were determined to build together. It wasn't an ending written in triumphant declarations, but a quiet, profound beginning, a promise sealed under the light of distant stars, a future built not on imperial decrees or cycles of vengeance, but on the hard-won, precious foundations of trust and love. It was, in its own way, the happiest of endings,